I was having coffee with a friend last week when his phone buzzed. He checked it, let out a sharp, irritated sigh, and slammed it face down on the table. It was his partner. She hadn't replied to his last text in 5 hours. For the next 10 minutes, he went on this fiery, righteous tirade about basic respect and how he wasn't going to tolerate being ignored. He looked totally in control, puffed up with anger, practically vibrating with the satisfaction of being the wronged party. He kept repeating that he was going to set her straight the moment he saw her. But then things took an unexpected turn. I waited for him to take a breath and gently asked, "Are you actually angry, or are you just worried she's pulling away?" The shift was instantaneous. The aggressive posture vanished, his shoulders slumped, and the color drained right out of his face. He stared down at his hands, suddenly looking incredibly small. The furious facade completely evaporated, replaced by this quiet, fragile look of dread. In a muted voice, he admitted he was terrified that he simply wasn't enough for her. Watching that sudden transformation from explosive rage to absolute vulnerability left me fascinated. The glaring contradiction between his loud, powerful outbursts and the deep fear underneath made it obvious. His anger wasn't a rational response to a late text. It was a shield. It was a habitual armor activated to protect him from a feeling that felt far too dangerous to expose. It makes you look at human behavior a little differently. When an emotion shows up constantly, intense and loud, you have to wonder, what is that feeling actually trying to hide?
It's wild because your friend probably thought he was asserting dominance, right? Like he was playing the part of the strong, wronged partner.
Oh, absolutely. He looked totally in control.
But internally, his brain was just, running a desperate cover-up operation. I mean, what you witnessed at that coffee shop wasn't just a quirky personality trait.
Right.
It was the fundamental objective architecture of human psychological survival playing out in real time. We always tend to think of our emotional experiences as flat.
Like whatever is on the surface is the whole truth.
Exactly. But human emotion operates on a really complex, multi-layered structure. The loud reactions like his anger are almost never the true emotional event.
So to really understand what happened to him, we have to look at the underlying mechanics.
And to map those mechanics, we use something clinical psychology calls the change triangle. It completely deconstructs how we process emotion.
Okay, so how does this triangle actually work?
Well, it breaks our internal experience down into 3 distinct corners. You have defenses, inhibitory emotions, and core emotions.
And my friend's anger, that explosive rage over the text, that wasn't a core emotion at all, was it?
Not even close. It was the final, desperate output of a system frantically trying to avoid a much deeper biological truth. It was a defense.
That makes total sense when I think about how his body physically shifted. It was misguided aggression designed to keep him away from the dread of abandonment.
It kept him safe from feeling that terror.
So I really want to explore this architecture of avoidance. If we're mapping out this change triangle for our listeners, let's start at the very bottom corner.
Core emotions.
Right, because these aren't just, vague or poetic feelings, they're biological.
Oh, they are entirely biological. We're talking about 7 highly specific core emotions that are wired directly into the mammalian nervous system.
And those 7 are fear, anger, sadness, disgust, joy, excitement, and sexual excitement.
That's the list. And I want to be really clear about how physical these are. They are automatic survival programs.
Meaning you can't just choose to feel them?
No, you don't decide to have a core emotion any more than you decide to digest your lunch. Each one has a specific evolutionary purpose designed to keep you safe.
Let's break those down because I think it's easy to take them for granted, like fear. Fear mobilizes escape.
Exactly. If a car swerves into your lane, fear is the biological fuel that slams your foot on the brake. You don't even have time to think about it.
Your conscious mind hasn't even formulated the thought yet.
Right. The blood literally rushes to your major muscle groups. Your pupils dilate. It's pure, actionable data.
And then there's anger. True, core anger. That protects boundaries, doesn't it?
Yes. If someone physically threatens you, the literal heat you feel in your chest gives you the forward momentum to defend yourself. It's the energy to say no.
What about sadness? That one feels so different.
Sadness invites comfort. The physical heaviness, the tears, they signal to your tribe that you've sustained a loss and need support.
So you don't wander off and perish in isolation and disgust.
Disgust warns of harm. It makes you physically recoil from rotting food, sure, but also from toxic social situations.
And then joy and excitement fuel growth and connection. They're all just pure data.
Pure data. But here is where the system runs into a massive problem.
The modern world.
Exactly. In the primal world, those raw responses kept us alive. But in our social world, they often get us into immense trouble.
Right, like if you express raw anger at your boss during a performance review.
Or if you collapse into profound sobbing sadness in the middle of a corporate strategy meeting, you risk severe social rejection.
And to our primal brains, social exile still equals death.
Right. A solitary human on the savannah was a dead human. So this is where the second corner of the triangle violently activates the inhibitory emotions.
Okay, so the brain senses that expressing the core emotion will get us kicked out of the tribe. What are the blockers?
There are three primary blockers: anxiety, shame, and guilt. And their mechanical function is literally to act as an internal emergency brake.
So they push down the core emotions.
Yes. To protect you from social exile, but also to prevent your nervous system from getting completely overwhelmed by the sheer voltage of the core emotion.
I want to make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. So if the core emotion is the accelerator, the raw energy, the inhibitory emotion, is the emergency brake. But, I mean, if you slam on the brakes while the engine is revving at 100 miles an hour, you create massive internal friction.
Immense friction. The biological energy of that core anger or grief doesn't just evaporate because you felt anxious. It gets trapped inside the physical body.
And sitting with that trapped energy is excruciating, right? Like the tight chest grip of anxiety or the literal nausea of shame.
It's unbearable. Nobody can live in that state 24/7. So to survive that agonizing friction, our mind creates the third corner of the triangle.
The defenses.
Exactly. Defenses are the highly creative, often invisible ways the mind avoids feeling both the friction of the inhibitory emotions and the terror of the core emotions beneath them.
They're survival strategies.
They are brilliant survival strategies. We pathologize them a lot, but they're trying to save us, especially when they form in childhood.
Yeah, I was looking at the sheer volume of things that count as defenses, and it's staggering. It starts with obvious stuff.
Like joking around, using sarcasm to deflect.
Or smiling and laughing when you're actually deeply upset. Changing the subject, avoiding eye contact.
Or simply shutting down completely.
Right.
But then they escalate, right? They become these complex, all-consuming psychological states.
Right, like chronic worrying or obsessive rumination. You spin your mind in circles so you don't have to drop into your body.
Perfectionism is a massive one. Procrastination, too.
Because the mind preoccupies itself with unreachable standards to avoid feeling what's in the nervous system.
Exactly. Overworking is another huge one. If you stay at the office until midnight every night, you never have a quiet moment on your couch to feel your loneliness.
And then it gets darker. Numbing defenses. Overeating, undereating, addictions.
Self-harm behaviors like cutting function as a defense, too. Using physical pain to override unbearable emotional pain.
But here's the part that really made me stop and push back. Depression. I always understood depression as a chemical imbalance, a biological illness. Yeah.
While there are neurochemical components to severe clinical depression and the change triangle, it functions as a massive systemic defense mechanism.
Wait, so the brain is actively choosing to be depressed?
Think of it as a total shutdown. When the core emotions are too terrifying and the anxiety and shame are too exhausting, the nervous system throws the main breaker.
Wow, it powers down the entire internal grid.
Yes, it cuts you off from all feeling, leaving you numb and devoid of energy. It's a desperate way to ensure those dangerous core emotions never see the light of day.
So depression is the system pulling the plug to prevent a meltdown.
Exactly.
And on the opposite end, you have misguided aggression, like my friend getting furious over a late text instead of facing his fear.
Or constantly judging others. Arrogance, prejudice. You externalize this vast internal discomfort onto an outside target so you never face your own pain.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy for the deep dive. If the mind is a high security facility, the core emotions are the vault.
Yeah.
They hold the most valuable, raw, biological truth of who you are. The inhibitory emotions, the anxiety, the shame, they're the blaring alarm system.
Triggering sheer panic the second anyone gets close to the vault.
Right. And the defenses. They're the decoy buildings placed miles away to distract attention entirely. You spend your whole life fighting battles in the decoy buildings.
Completely unaware the vault even exists. That is an incredibly precise and tragic visualization. True.
We just manage the decoys all day.
We try to life hack our doom scrolling or read a dozen productivity books to fix our procrastination. We go to talk therapy merely to analyze our perfectionism.
Endlessly rearranging the furniture in the decoy buildings.
But those behaviors are just the guards. The real work of human healing is navigating past the decoys, surviving the blaring alarm, and entering the vault.
Okay, so what actually happens when you get into the vault? Say you push through the anxiety and process the core anger or sadness. What is the target state?
The framework defines what lies completely beneath this triangle as the open-hearted state of the authentic self.
What does that actually look like mechanically?
It means that when you allow a core emotion to run its full biological course, when the physical wave surges and dissipates, you don't stay angry forever.
Emotions have a half-life, basically.
Yes, the internal pressure drops, and when it drops, you fall into this open-hearted state characterized by the 7 C's.
The 7 C's. Calm, curious, connected, compassionate, confident, courageous, and clear.
Exactly. Calm because the alarm stopped. Curious because you aren't defensive.
Connected because you aren't hiding behind a wall. Compassionate because you aren't projecting pain. Confident and courageous because you survived the vault.
And clear because the fog of anxiety is gone. This isn't mystical enlightenment. It's the baseline reality of a regulated nervous system.
It's a clarity right after a massive thunderstorm breaks. But, society rarely lets the storm break.
No, it doesn't.
Which brings us to how social conditioning violently manipulates this triangle. I want to look at the physical cost of this through the story of Chloe.
Chloe's experience painfully illustrates the destructive translation of a core emotion into an inhibitory state.
Tell us about Chloe.
She's a 34-year-old compliance officer working at a high-stakes tech firm in Dublin. Deeply rigorous, male-dominated corporate culture.
And the breaking point happens during a critical board meeting, right?
She spent 6 solid months meticulously compiling data for a massive compliance project. It's her baby.
And during her presentation, a male colleague completely hijacks the floor.
He openly claims her data as his own, presents her labor as his personal initiative. And when she politely attempts to clarify, he condescendingly talks right over her.
Cuts her off mid-sentence in front of the entire executive board. Objectively, the core emotion required there is anger.
Her boundaries have been violently breached. Anger's adaptive function is to provide the hot energy needed to speak up forcefully and reclaim her space.
But the reality of that specific room dictates a totally different reaction. There's no screaming or pounding on the table.
If we were watching a security camera, we'd just see her posture instantly stiffen. We'd see a strained, perfectly polite smile.
She's quietly nodding. But her internal reality is white-hot fury at a blatant injustice, and that fury has nowhere to go.
And this is the psychological translation occurring in milliseconds. Chloe's brain rapidly scans the environment and understands the unwritten corporate rules.
Rules that flag female anger as hysterical or unmanageable.
Exactly. If she expresses her legitimate core anger, she risks severe professional retaliation or social exile.
So her brain prioritizes survival over her emotional truth.
It slams on the emergency brake. It violently prevents the expression of anger by instantly deploying a massive wave of anxiety.
Her brain literally says, it is absolutely not safe to be angry in this room. I'm going to make you anxious instead.
And the somatic aftermath is devastating. Fast forward to 3 a.m. that night. The anger didn't vanish. It's trapped, suffocated under anxiety, and it begins to curdle.
Curdled anger. That's such a visceral way to describe it.
At 3 a.m., she's sitting on the cold tiles of her bathroom floor, locked in an obsessive defense mechanism, frantically checking work emails.
Desperately searching to see if she somehow failed a routine filing 3 months ago. Her mind is looking for a logical reason for the terrifying physical sensations.
Her heart is hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She can taste stomach acid. She's trembling.
And the tragic part is the psychological contortion. Instead of recognizing she was wronged, she's convinced she is the failure.
She takes the aggressive energy of her anger and turns it entirely back on herself. That redirection is the crux of the issue.
It's so violent. The core emotion was healthy and protective, but suppressed by anxiety, it curdled into a paralyzing physical sickness.
Her mind couldn't attack the colleague, so it attacked her. Her anxiety in that bathroom is quite literally the physiological manifestation of suppressed rage.
She's suffering a panic attack because her body is trying to contain a bomb.
Yes.
But this mechanism isn't always about a single workplace incident. Sometimes this architecture is built over decades.
Deep, permanent neurological lockdown.
Right. We need to look at what happens when the triangle is manipulated by chronic childhood trauma.
Julian's case takes us into the concrete architecture of trauma. He's a community social worker, but his historical context is foundational.
He grew up in an environment where any emotional expression was met with severe, unpredictable physical retaliation from his caregivers.
For a child in that environment, core emotions aren't just socially risky. They are physically life-threatening. If he feels, he gets hit.
So for 3 decades, Julian survived by operating at the absolute peak of the top left corner of the triangle. Extreme defenses.
And his primary defense wasn't doom scrolling. It was a cold, impenetrable, intellectual aloofness.
He became incredibly cerebral, analyzing everything from a safe, detached distance so he'd never have to drop into the vulnerability of his physical body.
It kept him physically safe in a violent home, but left him chronically disconnected as an adult, which we see vividly at the shelter he works at.
Right, there's a highly volatile confrontation. A client escalates and actually leans over and spits directly on Julian's desk.
In that moment, Julian's nervous system goes into complete lockdown.
Which is so counterintuitive, you should be furious or terrified. But his automatic defense is to retreat entirely into his mind.
While the client is screaming, Julian is analyzing the client's psychosocial background, pondering systemic failures instead of feeling the biological shock of being assaulted.
But a defense that rigid requires immense energy. It can't hold forever.
It fails, and he slides straight across the top of the triangle from the intellectual defense over to the inhibitory emotion of toxic shame.
The physical symptoms there are profound. He gets a violent wave of intense nausea, a terrifying disconnection from his body.
A mild dissociation where the room feels unreal. And then the heavy, suffocating shame paralyzes him in his chair.
His brain is using shame to freeze him, keeping him submissive to avoid the physical retaliation his inner child expects.
He's caught between the numbness of his intellect and the nausea of shame. And his sympathetic nervous system is trapped in permanent exhaustion.
Running the alarm system at full volume. But then Julian reaches this neuroscientific pivot, the moment in the car.
It's the turning point. He's sitting in his parked car in the rain right after the spitting incident.
The numbness is trying to pull him back to his intellect. The shame is trying to push him into self-loathing.
But this time he actively decides to map his somatic response. He drops his conscious attention out of his racing mind and down into his physical body.
He ignores the thoughts screaming, "I should have handled that better." He focuses entirely on the raw physical sensation.
He scans his body and identifies a deep, heavy, burning pressure right in the center of his chest.
And he realizes that pressure isn't shame. He pushes past the blaring alarms and arrives at the core emotion in the vault.
And what he finds isn't anger at the client. It is a massive, decades-old reservoir of profound grief.
He unlocks the vault. And the process of releasing it isn't tidy.
He sits in his car, pulls out a rough paper napkin from the glove compartment, and just begins to weep.
Agonizing, body-shaking sobs, grieving for the helpless little boy he was and the broken people he tries to save.
He doesn't try to stop it. He lets the physical wave wash through his system, and the biological mechanics of this are miraculous.
By letting the body experience the muscular act of crying, the amygdala finally gets the signal that the danger has passed.
The trauma response, suspended for 30 years, completes its cycle. The chronic anxiety dissipates because he is integrating dissociated neural networks.
The isolated part holding that childhood terror finally communicates with his safe adult self. The pressure vents out into the car.
And he touches that open-hearted state. He feels calm and clear.
Which brings us to a really critical realization. The change triangle isn't a static map. It's a turbulent system of internal conflicts.
It manifests wildly differently depending on a person's unique psychological profile. We really need to look at some clinical cartography.
Let's map these out. The first case is Fran. She's a perfect example of how breaking down defenses can be turbulent.
Fran's primary defense was simply changing the subject. Whenever an internal feeling approached, she'd pivot to something superficial.
But when she started forcing herself to stop changing the subject, she didn't just peacefully slide down into a core emotion.
No, her clinical map shows rapid, violent oscillation. She started bouncing up and down the right side of the triangle like a pinball.
She'd let go of the defense, get hit with intense panic, push through it, and touch the core emotion of grief.
But the unfamiliar intensity of that sadness would instantly terrify her nervous system, triggering the panic alarm again, shooting her right back up.
Yo-yoing, 1 minute sadness, next minute vibrating panic. Why does the brain bounce like that?
It's testing the waters, like touching a hot stove. It dips into grief, gets scared, retreats, dips down again, realizes it didn't die, retreats slower.
It's building distress tolerance.
Exactly. Eventually, she was able to stay in the vault, fully experience the grief, and enter the open-hearted state.
And in that calm state, she spontaneously gained profound insight into her past trauma. The insight comes after the feeling, not instead of it.
Then you have Bonnie. Her defense was Vagueness?
Yeah.
Blurry, non-committal answers? Oh, it's whatever.
But the clinical map showed a specific blockade. When she moved past the fog, she'd touch her core anger toward her father.
But the moment that anger surfaced, the inhibitory emotion of guilt immediately rose up to crush it. Cultural programming dictated she must not be angry at her parents.
So the guilt acted as a brick wall, shoving her back up the triangle, making the anger entirely unsafe to feel.
A permanent loop. Now let's look at Sarah. Her map is deeply complex, a multi-layered trauma structure.
She lived permanently in the upper corners. Intense perfectionism, self-harm, cutting, heavy depression.
When she wasn't trapped in those defenses, she was suffocating under high anxiety, massive guilt, and profound freeze states.
She's like a pendulum swinging between asserting a boundary and the absolute terror of the consequences.
For Sarah, simply asserting her needs, like telling a friend she didn't want to go to a certain restaurant, triggered core anger.
The healthy energy needed to hold a boundary, but that spark of anger acted as a tripwire.
It instantly triggered a traumatic memory of her highly abusive mother, skyrocketing her anxiety and shame.
To stop those painful feelings, she'd deploy a massive defense. She would abruptly end the relationship. She sacrificed relationships to keep the terror buried.
And the tragic layer to Sarah's map is her 3-year-old inner child part. That part held primal rage from being abused, an impulse to attack back.
But a 3-year-old can't survive without a caregiver, so the terror of abandonment forced the child into the defense of believing I am bad.
If the child believes she is bad, she maintains the illusion the parent is good. It secures physical survival at the cost of turning all rage inward.
It's the ultimate sacrifice. And finally, we have Mario. His primary trauma happened at age 4.
His armor was massive dissociation, falling into a black hole, chronic depression, low self-esteem.
Beneath those defenses was paralyzing anxiety, and in the vault was pure terror from that specific 4-year-old traumatic event.
But the mapping reveals a secondary, hidden triangle operating underneath, a basement beneath the vault.
Once you moved past the initial terror, there was another conflict. Mario harbored a core emotion of absolute murderous rage regarding what happened to him.
But this rage was completely blocked by intense guilt. The guilt prevented him from accessing the anger necessary to validate that wounded boy.
So his healing journey had to be sequential. He had to drop down into the emotions one by one. First, profound grief, mourning for the innocent child.
Only after moving completely through that grief could he access pride in his resilience and gratitude. That downward movement delivered him to the open-hearted state.
This detailed cartography brings us to the most actionable part of our discussion. We know what the decoy buildings look like. How do we objectively dismantle them?
We need to transition to the mechanics of descent, the step-by-step process of somatic navigation.
1. Identifying the position. Locating where you are on the map in real time.
Catching yourself in the act of a defense, pausing mid-action and acknowledging, I am endlessly doom-scrolling right now.
Or, I'm snapping at my partner over the dishwasher.
Naming the defense breaks its unconscious hold over you. It's not a personality trait. It's an active maneuver to avoid feeling.
Once you identify you're in defense mode, you initiate step 2, the mandatory shift from cognitive thought to somatic awareness.
Dropping into the physical body.
I want to pause here. What does that actually mean? If I'm doom scrolling, how do I mechanically do this? Do I just stare at my hands?
It's a mechanical shift of attention. You literally get out of your head. You stop the internal monologue.
Stop asking, what does this text mean for my future?
You cut the narrative cord. You direct all conscious attention to the physical sensations inside your flesh. What is happening inside my rib cage?
Is my jaw clamped? Is my stomach tight?
You scan for physical tension and breathing patterns. You become a scientist, observing your own biology.
So I notice my chest is tight. That somatic shift lowers the anxiety enough to begin step 3, trying on core emotions.
With your attention anchored in your physical sensations, you test the core emotions sequentially.
Like sitting at the optometrist trying on lenses to see which brings the image into focus. Is there sadness here? Fear? Disgust?
And the body will respond. A word will resonate and the physical sensation will shift. But here we must define the difference between inhibitory and core sensations.
To the untrained observer, they feel similar. Like anxiety versus fear, they're used interchangeably, but they're completely different mechanisms.
Anxiety is an inhibitory emotion. It's the brake pedal. It's static, chaotic, and paralyzing. It spins the mind in endless circles.
It creates a vague sense of impending doom and severely confuses decision-making. Anxiety wants you to hide. Fear, however, is a core emotion.
The accelerator. It is sharp, clear, and highly directional. Fear informs you of a highly specific danger and offers an actionable path.
Say you feel bubbly, chaotic anxiety about a presentation. Your defense is procrastinating by cleaning the kitchen.
When you catch the defense, you stop, drop into your body, and test the lenses. Am I angry? Sad? Afraid?
And suddenly the lens clicks. The chaotic anxiety is actually masking a specific core fear, the fear of embarrassing yourself.
And notice what happens when the fear is named. The chaos stops. It isn't vague doom anymore. It's concrete reality.
And fear gives you a choice. Run away or tolerate the physical sensation and choose courage. If you choose courage, the chaotic anxiety vanishes.
This highlights the ultimate biological reality. Emotions are a very real physiological treasure system.
Biological energy, literal pressure, is created in the nervous system. If you block it with anxiety or overworking, the pressure doesn't disappear.
It remains trapped, generating the agonizing symptoms of anxiety, depression, and physical pain.
Which means unblocking the core emotions, naming them, feeling the physical wave, is the only way to release that physiological pressure.
You have to vent the system. When the pressure is vented through crying or healthy anger, the system naturally resets.
Halting the symptoms because the body no longer has to expend metabolic energy holding down the explosion. The storm passes.
And you're left standing in the clear, calm center of your authentic self.
To synthesize the core architectural reality we've explored today, the visible struggles that dominate our lives, the chronic 3 a.m. anxiety, the explosive rage over a late text, the heavy weight of depression, are frequently not the root issue at all. They are the brilliant, incredibly creative, and ultimately exhausting defense mechanisms of a mind that is terrified of its own core truth.
Whether it's the righteous anger masking the dread of abandonment, the paralyzing panic covering up legitimate workplace fury, or the detached intellect hiding decades of unresolved grief, the fundamental mechanism is exactly the same.
We construct massive, elaborate fortresses. We build decoy buildings miles away from the vault, all to avoid the simple biological reality of our own feelings.
But the devastating cost of that lifelong avoidance is our connection to ourselves, our health, and our connection to the world around us.
And this leaves us with a definitive, objective reality regarding the nature of emotional memory. The conscious mind tracks the passage of time. It counts the days, the years, and the decades. It rationalizes that the past is safely over and done with. But the physical body and the nervous system do not understand the passage of time. An unexpressed core emotion, a wave of sheer terror, a massive surge of protective rage, or a profound body-shaking grief from an event that occurred 30 years ago is not a memory fading quietly in the distance. It is a live, high-voltage electrical current actively happening in the nervous system today. It is waiting with infinite, unwavering patience for the exact moment the conscious mind finally drops its exhausting defenses, turns off the alarms, and decides it is finally safe enough to feel.